What's happening? And we are live.
Well, welcome everyone. We are super excited to be here with you in our panel of our group Coaching HQ. We have two amazing coaches sharing at this stage with us. But first, I'd like to introduce my partner in crime, Dominique. So she will be moderating today's conversation. I'm Maribel Alemán. We're both executive coaches, founders of Group Coaching HQ. And with us, we have Lisa Pachence. She's an executive and leadership coach, and I love how she describes herself to big-hearted high achievers who crave extraordinary impact without the extraordinary exhaustion. And I think we can all relate to that, right? She is a master certified coach. She's a mentor coach, a speaker, and founder of LP Coaching and Consulting. And she offers designer coaching to clients such as Google execs, startup founders, and entrepreneurs. And also with us, a wonderful Kacey Cardin. She is an executive and leadership coach. She's a facilitator, a TEDx speaker, a wonderful presence. We had her as a guest coach in Group Coaching HQ in our pilot program. She works with executives, top performers in multinational finance and law firms, entrepreneurs, and creative leaders across the board in sports and entertainment industries. Ladies, such a pleasure, such an honor to be here with you. And moderating, Dominique, you're going to take off our first set.
Welcome, everyone. So happy to have you both here. And I'm actually going to start by asking you about your moment. And I know I didn't prepare you for this, but I want it to be a surprise. What is a moment where you were astonished in a group session as a client or as a coach?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, let me think on this for a second. Sit as a client or a coach, yeah? Okay.
Kacey, you need a minute to think about it. I actually have.
Do you have one? Go
yeah, I have a moment. So it was the second group that I was running, and this was, I want to say, about 5 years ago. I had started a women's entrepreneur group called the Elite Entrepreneur, and it was a small group of about 5 women. And 2 of them had buddied up to do practices together. I think it was the second or third month. And they hit a big roadblock when it came to their personalities. So I actually don't remember what happened, but there was some text fighting and some drama happening behind the scenes. And of course, I was facilitating the group. And I remember being very concerned because this was my second group, and I didn't know, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. So I took it to my coach and I got really supported. And the thing that I walked away with and what I actually brought to the group was how the triggers that we have in other people, the things that trigger us about other people, are the biggest gifts to ourselves. Those are actually the most coachable moments, when all our stuff is up and our defenses are up and we can actually catch our survival mechanism in the moment. And I remember the coaching conversation that ensued was so generative and so powerful. All of us ended up crying because of what we had distinguished, including myself. I left in tears. I like to say, like, it's not a good day until someone cries, either me or my clients. And it really pointed to the power of being able to bring everything in the moment, especially the mess, even as a coach. It's so important for me to be able to lean into the unknown, especially when I'm scared and especially when they're scared. It was so powerful. It was a great group too. So that was my moment. I was astonished as well.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
I think for me, something that really continuously astonishes me when I do groups is how they come together. And how no matter how hard you try to perfectly design who's going to be in the group and how many and all of that, for me, every time I've ever led or been a part of a group, the way that it ends up, and sometimes you have people come and go in the beginning. It takes like a month to kind of sort itself out. People shake themselves out. But I never fail to be astonished at how it is always the perfect people at the perfect time, in the perfect group for them, you know, and the way that you start to discover little things they have in common, whether it's goals that become, you know, present in the process that you wouldn't have thought these people would possibly be going for the same type of thing, you know, or just characteristics, like different parts of what makes them a great leader. They are, just like you kind of pointed to, being mirrors, but not just for the things that might be defense mechanisms, but for all of the great things and the purpose, the things that people are there for, and the common threads that you uncover. And for me, I'm always astonished because I just have so many moments where I'm like, wow, I could not possibly have designed that or known that was going to happen. So there's just like that little bit of sort of magic, you know, that it feels like, that always astonishes me.
Love this. Love this. Thank you. Go ahead, Maribel.
No, I'm just saying I love the word magic because it is such a descriptive moment, and both the things that you both have shared, you know, we always talk about that, and the cool part, the idea that we need to be so present, let it go and go with the flow. And it maybe is that friction point and we all end up crying, or we allow that discovery of different goals. But it is very much a sense of being comfortable with who you are as a coach and what you're bringing and holding that. So I love those shares that you just made.
Yeah, thanks, Maribel. I think it also is important as coaches, often when these crazy moments like you described, Lisa, happen, to remind everyone, hey, this is probably part of the storming phase. We're getting to know each other, and that's a normal thing to happen. It's good for the groups to get these things out. So, and yeah, so agree with you, Maribel, all about how much we trust ourselves. Kacey, I want to bring up something that you shared. You said at the beginning, people come and go, and sometimes it might happen that you start a group and a person might decide to actually leave the group. And if one person leaves the group, it actually creates a whole new dynamic, and it can be really disruptive. So I'm wondering if either of you have experienced this, and two things: how you dealt with it and how you ensure that your coaches are committed so that it doesn't happen.
Yeah. I think it's great to normalize it. Honestly, very rarely have I had, definitely with larger groups, I find that there is almost always at least one person who will leave that container at some point in the process. And if you're willing to really allow it to be perfect, you know, and willing to allow it to just be part of not only that person's process, but the group's journey, you know, it can actually be the most impactful thing that happens in the entire process, if you're willing to hold it that way. No, I will also say I have had groups in the past that were comprised of only 2 people in the group,
yep,
and one of them left. So that's definitely happened once in the last several years. I think addressing it head on, not trying to cover it up, not trying to pretend, you know, or like sometimes it's tempting to try to save face, right? Or make yourself wrong for that happening, versus just really being honest with the impact that it has for you. Asking your group, what's the impact that you all are experiencing, and what are you present to? What does this bring up for you? You know, there's just often a lot of gold in it if you're willing to really be with it and allow everybody to be vulnerable about the impact.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is such a great conversation. Quitting was something that always triggered me in group settings personally, because I have a thing against allowing myself to quit. So when I first entered personal development, it was something that I really had to learn to be with. But, you know, over time as a coach, I realized that if our clients don't want to quit at some point, we're not actually doing our jobs. We're not pushing them so far against their stuff that we get to, you know, connect in the emotion and in the mess. And to Kacey's point, really get to see the value of what happens when we're way outside our comfort zone and in the resiliency zone. In my point of view, most of life's successes is about how much we're willing to be it with our stuff and be resilient around it. And so I entirely agree with Kacey that some of the greatest lessons and learnings and value is when we're pushed way outside our comfort zone and we want to get out of our commitment. But on the flip side, I also set up group dynamics with very, very crystal clear agreements that oftentimes will be very redundant and say, hey, at some point you're going to want to quit. You're going to be triggered. You're going to, second guess your commitments. That's normal when we're up to things that are different than how life normally goes. Like when we're climbing, the bigger the mountain we climb, the more we're going to second guess ourselves. So I like to spend the first month of coaching inside a group looking at our self-sabotage mechanisms, our patterns, our commitment cycle. Like at some point, everyone wants to quit. Where is that thing? And what do we need to put into place to support you to come back and be your commitment afterwards?
I love that because it's always about putting the mirror back on them, right? And one thing I sometimes see group coaches making a mistake early in their group coaching career is making it all about themselves. Like, I'm a failure. I did this, when it's really such a rich opportunity, like you both have described, to explore and mine.
I agree. And the other thing is sometimes it's actually a good thing if someone leaves the group. Sometimes it means that they want the right fit, they for themselves and for the rest of the group. So appreciate you both for also highlighting the importance of bringing that to the group and consistently talking about it.
I'm glad you brought up the quitting on purpose, or having somebody leave the group intentionally. Yeah. I actually had to deal with that fairly recently in one of my groups. There was one group member who it was just very clear that it was bringing up some mental health issues. There were some financial issues showing up, and it was to the degree that it was really going to be detrimental, not only to that person's work, but to the group dynamic and to the group process, so that person and I had to have a really honest conversation and check in about, hey, is this still actually in service of you to participate? Or does this need to happen over, like, go handle these things and then come back into the next, cohort or something like that? And being able to address that with the group and addressing a breakdown like that. And who do you all want to be for this person as they, complete their time with us? There's just, again, so many opportunities to coach people around very real life things, because the things that happen in the group, the things that show up, the parts of our life process are happening out in the real world. So it's a great point to remember.
That's a great question. Is this still in service for you? Right? It's about, you're feeding the mirror. So we want to ask, we have this whole idea.
Maribel, can you, I think your volume is a little weird.
Oh, is that better?
There you go. Yes.
Okay,
much.
Great. So we did want to explore this whole idea of bringing fun, using different tools to astonish our group members. So our group coaching HQ, we provide the coaches with a lot of tools and techniques, ideas, in a way for them to coach in a fun, yet deep and engaging way. So we want to ask both of you, what are your favorite ways to go deep while perhaps bringing a little surprise to your members?
I personally really like sort of like field trips, if you will, which is interesting. Most of the groups are virtual and in different parts of the world, but sometimes I'll have buddy pairings take on practices that the other one is doing. A lot of times it will be a stretch for both people, and it could be something like go to a dance class or go take an art class or, write a poem for your romantic partner and share it with the group. It's something like that, like that's creative, very much outside of the realm, and usually having nothing to do with the goal that they're there for, in the end result on the surface, but has them stretch in some way. I also lead a women's group, and part of what they get as part of the group package is that they also get a yoga class and a chakralesque class every month as part of their group participation. And for a lot of the women, that is not something that's a part of their normal routine. It's a new way to reinvent their relationship with their bodies or with their sensuality, their spirituality. So I like to find something like that for all of my groups that's going to be a bit of a stretch, but in a fun way.
That's awesome.
These are great questions, by the way. I feel like every coach needs to ask themselves these questions. How am I astonishing my group? How am I bringing surprise? How am I challenging them? In my opinion, I think the greatest surprises come when we as coaches are willing to throw out the script and be with whatever comes up in the moment. Like that to me is true group coaching, having a container, having some tools in your back pocket, having some themes, but also be able to say like, ooh, that thing that you just brought up right there, Jane, like that's really, really interesting. Who else sees something for themselves there? How do you see this connecting to our theme? Dancing in the moment always seems to provide something else that is it's very soul enriching past the curriculum. It also requires that trust element that we were talking about, like the intuition and trusting yourself, trusting the group, trusting that people will generate as well. But I also like to make sure that I have tools in my back pocket that will also generate surprise. Like most of my coaching tools are meant to generate new light bulbs with my clients. If they don't generate new awarenesses, then I probably need to get some new tools. So the whole point in my group is that people transform, not just change, that their insides are also changing along with their outsides. I also think that buddy systems, like what Kacey pointed to, always generate something wildly different than whatever I thought it was going to generate. So the surprises that we're talking about, I also incorporate into my own experiences when I'm surprised, just as well as when they're surprised. I feel like we did something right. Yeah, buddy systems, buddy pairings, having the group participants start to coach and stand for each other always seems to create another level of awareness, camaraderie, rapport, depth than expected. And last but not least, I really wanted to put this in, vulnerability begets vulnerability. And so when it comes to depth and surprise, that's the place that I always take a look at, is how vulnerable are we being as a group? How vulnerable am I being as a coach? And like, what's that next layer that might bring something different that we haven't touched yet because, you know, there's a defense there, or there's a wall there. How do we crack into that?
So appreciate. Oh.
Yeah, I would add the moments that you are willing to show up and trust the clients, trust the group, just as much as you trust yourself and your tools. Those have been some of the most eye-opening, awe-inspiring calls that I've ever been on. Not just for the participants, but for me. And you know, a lot of times I will co-facilitate groups with another coach. And there have been moments where we're, you know, in the little private chat to the side going, oh my gosh, never would have seen this coming. Couldn't have planned it better. This is amazing. Let's just let them go. Let's just let them run. They're crushing it. This is great. Yeah.
I'm curious, when you have put into play these tools to astonish the group members, how have you met resistance? And if so, how have you helped them maybe get over it so they can have that aha moment?
I'm actually dealing with a situation in a current group with a participant who was so excited to start the group, but has felt really confronted by the level of vulnerability and openness. You know, a lot of times with my groups, we'll have them utilize like a WhatsApp chat or something like that to communicate in between group calls. And this actually goes for a lot of my groups. There are always some people who are so comfortable on a chat like that and on WhatsApp, and they're chiming in every single day and they're putting a lot in. And then you've got a few people for whom that is incredibly overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's, you know, a social anxiety type of overwhelm. And sometimes it's just, I have so many things to do. Don't you people have jobs? How are you on WhatsApp 40 times a day? You know, and I find that shows up every single time. And it's a great I'll say a great form of resistance that shows up to get to work through what is that actually bringing up? How, like, what kind of pressure are you putting on yourself that has this land this way for you? And how is that exactly what you didn't know you were here for? You know, and that, I think that question, how is this exactly what you didn't know you were here for, is a great way to shake up resistance when it shows up.
That's so brilliant, Kacey. It reminds me of the quote, the way we do anything is the way we do everything. Like, our relationship to what we're resisting in a coaching group is the same relationship to resistance somewhere else in our life. Like, if we're resistant to being the first one to talk and we're always the last one to talk, that's probably going to show up elsewhere. That self-advocation, resistance to being assertive, resistance to being bold or taking risks. And I think it's such a teachable moment and an opportunity to go into the breakthrough with that individual and with the group and go, hey, like, what is the breakthrough here that would have your life go so differently if you were able to get beyond this, if you were able to have choice and agency instead of just allowing your resistance to take hold and point you in a different direction. And the way that I typically set up groups, there's always individual projects for each person, individual goals, something they want to get out of it. And so a trick of the trade for me is always pointing back to that thing, that goal, that bigger project, and going, hey, if the way we do anything is the way we do everything, how might this thing, this resistance to that tool, the resistance to being on WhatsApp, getting in the way of this project and what you want? What might be there for you?
Thank you both. I so appreciate both of you being willing to go there, because you've mentioned quite a few things, and I want to go back to a few things you've mentioned so that people have a minute to take in some of it. You started by talking about trusting yourself, and that's come up a couple of times in this conversation. So I'm going to talk or ask you a question on that in a second. You also talked about peer coaching and how important it is and how astonishing it can be when you let the wisdom of the group take over and when you let everyone else ask questions and trust. And Kacey, you mentioned this, trust that they'll get the value they need from the coaching and from the group and from the conversation. And I think often actually telling members that we trust them to do that enables them to do that, letting them know, hey, this is your experience, so whatever you put into it and is what you're going to get out of it, and whatever you don't put into it is also what you're going to get out of it. So what is it that what is the value that you're creating for yourself here? And what I was going to ask you both about trust is, you're obviously both very established, you're experienced, you've coached individuals, groups for a long time. How have you noticed your trust in yourself build? Because we have a lot of coaches who are not as experienced, and so I'd love to hear from both of you, how has this trust been able to build? And as you think about this, I also want to let those who are watching know that you're very welcome to ask questions in the chat at any time, and we'll be happy to ask Lisa and Kacey. So how did you manage to build this trust for yourself?
That is such a great question. And as I look back, I realize mine has sort of gone like this throughout the process. I think when I first started to run groups, I was terrified and felt like I had no clue what I was doing. Who let this person in here? Who let me in here?
Yeah, hand up if you felt that way.
And then I went through a phase of really feeling like, okay, I got this figured out, nailing it. Like, I got that. I know all there is to know about this. And then it's one of those things where the more you know, the less you realize you know. You realize what you don't know. And so then there's that next phase of your skill level, I think, starts to get better, but your confidence starts to plummet as you realize that there's a lot to learn and more growing to do. And then you kind of go back up as you practice that again. And for me, that's just kind of a constant in this profession.
Thank you.
And I will add, I think the minute that you feel like you've got it all figured out, just know that you're probably about to hit a breakdown of some sort that's going to help you grow into your next level, and that is perfect.
Thank you.
This is such a great question. I love that Audrey put that in the chat box. So this is my favorite graphic that I like to show my clients about breakthroughs and patterns. It is as simple as this. Breakthroughs happen like somersaults. It's like, at first when you're going into something, you're like, wee, it's new. Oh my God, what am I doing? Oh, I'm terrible. And you're like, oh, okay, I can do this. And then you're like, wee, oh no, it's going downhill. So, Kacey, to your point, I feel like I'm going to be on an endless loop of that. I think that no matter how long anyone runs groups or coaches or leads, if you are doing the work yourself to transform and to continue to dive into that unknown of what you don't know, you will be going into that somersault loop. And I think that trust is really a choice. So even if I'm not feeling confident, like there's a difference between confidence and trust for me. Even if I'm not feeling confident, I can choose to trust that it will be okay, that I have support systems, that I can always go to my coach, that I can always ask my community, that I can always bring tools, that I can always set the container, that I can always ask my clients for support and for reflections, that end. But I think it comes down to trust being a choice, and that there's always going to be an endless spectrum of confidence, no confidence, confidence, no confidence, which is why I always tell my clients, do not rely on confidence as a prerequisite to doing anything, because it will come and go and it will not be reliable to push us there. But trust and commitment is absolutely a choice.
Love that.
I also think of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
This
is your show.
No. Okay, this is 2 points then. One, it's helpful to remember that group coaching is not your show. Like that you're not there to show up and perform for your coachees. That's one thing. And I almost forgot the other thing. It'll come to me. There was one. It was about the process, y'all. It'll come to me. I'll chime back in a second. Sorry.
Oh, I have something to add, actually. I think it's really important to mention that for trained coaches, it is so important to not have groups be the first thing you go out and run. To actually get some experience one-on-one with people, learning to be with them, learning to coach, learning the coaching process. Like as coaches, we're not experts in anything but the coaching process. That's the whole point of the International Coach Federation, is that we put down our expertise and our performance and trust the process and trust that foundation. But we need to get facile with being with other people individually before we can lead a group, or at least alongside while we're leading a group, because the more people that you're with, the more stuff is in the space, the more survival mechanism, the more dynamic. So I always recommend that not be the first thing that you go do.
Agreed. I wanted to bring up a couple of things again that you both shared, and thinking about Lisa, what you just shared, really building your coaching muscle one-on-one. I think what it also does is that it helps you understand who you are as a coach, and it helps you see like what you bring to the equation or how you show up to the equation, and often that will translate to how you show up to your groups. And one of the things that we're really focused on at Group Coaching HQ is really helping everyone understand that there isn't just one way to be a group coach, and that's why we have 4 different guest coaches who come in, and everyone gets to see each other coach. And so when they saw Kacey coach and they saw Mark or Catherine or Marsha, every single person has their own style, has their own way of doing things, and that's because they've spent the time. You both mentioned doing the work on yourself. They all have spent a lot of time and continue to do the work, but also have really understood how they want to show up as a coach. Maribel, anything that you wanted to add here?
No, just to underline that it's okay to go in and be curious about what is it that you want to build for yourself as a coach and experiment. And then that you can start to decide, hey, what's the design that I want for my group coaching program, right? Do I want to perhaps work with women or perhaps work with entrepreneurs, right? You're not really going to know that until you have this experience, like Lisa was mentioning, of working with various individuals. And that way you can see, okay, I can bring this great coaching process, but this is going to be my sweet spot, right? And apply everything you've learned to that.
100%.
You've reminded me of my thing that I forgot a second ago, which was around confidence. And what you just touched on makes me think of, when I think of confidence, like Lisa was pointing to, sometimes confidence feels sort of elusive. It's this thing that shows up when the circumstances are just right. And I like to think of it as a mix of authenticity and commitment, and that's the thing that you bring to every group call, no matter what happens. You get clear on what your commitment is to those people, and then you are just authentically living your experience of that commitment with whatever comes up. And I think that is one of the most important things to remember when you're in your process.
And then just to piggyback on that, things that is so important. In the pilot, we're having a discussion, and as they have an opportunity to coach to each other and demonstrate what they're learning. And in one of the conversations, it was that aha moment of, wow, when I allowed myself to be authentic rather than trying to mimic all of the other group coaches I've seen, I was actually much better. I was actually getting the moment that the group needed for itself in this particular topic we were addressing, right? So this whole idea of allowing yourself to be authentic rather than let me figure out who I can copy is so critical for us to create a great experience for the group.
And sometimes to remember that your only job is to hold the space. There will be some calls where you just greet everybody, welcome them in, and then sit back. And you will not need to have a golden nugget or the perfect thing to say. You just let it be, and you hold people in their experience.
And that's actually, to me, one of the most incredible signs of intelligence for group coaches, is being able to take that step back and say, like you said earlier, Kacey, this is not my show. This is all about you, and I am here to create the space, to create the container or to co-create rather the container. We've co-created norms. We've created this space together. I can take a step back, observe, perhaps make notes on themes that are coming up, notice what's happening in the coachees, in their body language, and perhaps bring that up if it's appropriate. But being able to take a step back and let the group lead is, to me, one of the most incredible signs of intelligence.
One of the ways that I set up a group is to actually put in at the beginning, not every one of our group calls is going to feel like a slam dunk for you. You are not going to walk away with every group call with the life-changing breakthrough, of the week. So I set up the expectation of it getting to be a process. So it not only takes the pressure off of you as the coach to feel like you have to show up and deliver some thing for them, but also sets them up to really start to integrate this work into their day-to-day lives so that it's all just a process. Your group coaching is not just the 1 hour that you set aside to do your work. It's just now a normal part of the foundation of your life.
Someone put in the chat a conversation about experimentation and the experimentation concept. I think it was Mark Myers. I think that's so important. So as we're talking about, sometimes we hold the space, and sometimes we bring a different energy, and sometimes we lean back or lean in. It's so important to be intentional about what you're experimenting with and go, oh, okay, well, I noticed that there's a lot of the participants are in the space and they're really taking the mic and they're rolling with something. I'm going to experiment with leaning back and asking them to lead the conversation, or having them lead the conversation, and I just facilitate rather than direct. But it's super important that, back to your point, Maribel, about needing to mimic other people, I think it's important to find what fits you. And at first you won't know what fits you as a group leader. And so sometimes you do look to other concepts, other containers, other people, and you go, okay, I'm going to try that. But notice when the experimentation leads into comparison or copying. And that's when the performance or the not good enough might come up, and you might think, "Whoa, I'm not doing right. Something's going wrong." Rather than, "Oh, this experiment is very interesting. Maybe we change it up." But treat it like that instead of something to get right or wrong, because the human experience isn't about a right or wrong. It's just about the journey.
It's been so great. I love that you said that, Lisa. It reminded me of a moment in the pilot where we had a guest coach, and at the end of the session, one of our trainees said, "I will never do that in my practice." And it was such a great moment of, I understand what's not right for me, and I don't feel like, oh, I have to do, because this person did it and they're experienced and they're great at what they do, then I have to go and do that for myself. No, it was a moment of exactly what you just shared. This is great, but it's not for me, and that's okay. I know what I need to do and what sits well with me in my own practice. But it just reminded me of that moment.
That's hysterical.
It was good. It was very good.
But the flip side of that is also be okay or be ready to be surprised, right? So you can go in with these assumptions, like, I will never do that. And then, the whole idea of sitting back and allowing the group to do its thing with the peer coaching, and you don't participate, quote unquote, as much. I don't know about you, but when it first happened, first group, I was like, wait, what? I said 3 words and they had this magic moment. I didn't do, what's going on, right? So that was a big surprise. So being okay with letting go of the assumptions and being surprised at what you could discover for yourself.
Agreed. I'm going to go, this is probably going to be our last question. So please, if you're watching and you have questions, put them in the chat. We'll see if we can get to them. But we talked, so our topic for today was really about astonishing our group coaches. And we talked about different ways to astonish so far, through perhaps play, or through bringing them to a place where they didn't know they were going to go and didn't expect to go. I'm wondering then, what are some ways that you like to bring challenge to the group? And I think it's important for everyone who's watching to just gather a couple of tools here, maybe, or techniques that you use to challenge the group.
2 things come up for me. One we've touched on, but haven't really gone into it too much, which is peer coaching, and actually providing your group with some peer coaching tools. And this is challenging because a lot of times in group settings, people are really prone to want to give advice or to want to commiserate with each other, as a way to connect or a way to bond. And it's often a really positive challenge when you actually give them some group coaching tools and have them intentionally practice being coached with each other. And I think, those are amazing tools for life. A lot of times you have clients come back and say, oh, I actually showed up as coach with my kids or my partner or whatever, instead of telling them what to do or trying to fix it for them. I just got in with them and got curious with them. So I think that's one. And the other one that really just came up for me as you were speaking around astonish your group coachees is to be aware that some people are going to have a particular relationship to being astonished, to being impressed. It might be interesting to get curious with your clients up front about what is your relationship to wonder, just to awe and wonder, and how does it show up in your life? Do you allow it? If not, what's in the way of you getting to be astonished in this life? And I think a question like that will open up a lot for a lot of people in the groups.
Those are really, really great points. I love and I want to underscore the peer coaching concept. And slowly over time, I notice in each of my groups, there's more potential and more muscle around reflection and peer coaching within the group. But I usually do not start with that. I'll usually begin facilitating a coaching discussion amongst peers by asking questions like, Jane, what do you see for Sharon as far, I'm using fake names, by the way. Jane, what do you see for Sharon as far as her breakthrough around being bold? Mm-hmm. Or what resonates with you most around what you heard in Sharon? And so I'll begin to offer opportunities for people in the group to begin those discussions, but it's a slow process. And Jody just put in the comments, I'm curious how these speakers use facilitation and coaching, and I want to actually use this moment to distinguish that. So facilitation is much more about a directive conversation, as in there is a specific theme, there's a place to get to, and you facilitate a discussion towards that, almost like what we're doing today. Whereas coaching is much more about the Socrates, asking questions. Where does the client want to go? What's their request? What's their direction? And setting the foundation there first, which you can do if you set the container in the group setting and go, hey, Jane, would you like some coaching around that? Great. Where would you like to go? And what would you like to walk away with? And then you coach around that versus your own agenda.
I'll add to that, as far as facilitation, within a group setting, as the coach, you will likely be stepping in to facilitate a conversation that is unlike the type of conversation that most people are used to having out in the world. So you're not facilitating in the way that you're in charge, you're dictating how it goes, but you do want to facilitate making sure that people are being called forth, are people being drawn out of their comfort zone, and who do you need to be for them, and how do you facilitate the flow of the conversation? In group coaching, you want to make sure that everybody has a little time in the spotlight. You will likely find that some people, like we've touched on, are always the first to speak, or some people always want to take up, 3/4 of the call, and then that one person is like, oh no, it's fine, I'll go last. I don't really have anything to say. You are going to have to step in as facilitator every now and then to actually catalyze people's breakthroughs and growth.
Ooh, it's a great word, catalyze. And I concur with that practice, having people practice the opposite of in group settings. So if you speak first, have them speak last, and address it in the moment so that you are modeling a coachable or coaching experience. And oftentimes the best way that we learn is through seeing it modeled for us. And so that's why I believe peer coaching comes naturally in a group coaching setting, because we're seeing other people model it for us. And then we start to embody those moments, those questions, those abilities to say, hey, I noticed my buddy over here is last to speak in last sessions. She committed to being more bold and speaking first. How about she speaks first? And learning to stand for each other in a different way.
I just wanted to highlight something you said earlier. You were giving the example of, Jane, would you be okay? Would you like to be coached on this, right? In that moment where we're challenging, one of the things we talked about a lot in our cohort was the idea of asking permission, right? And making sure that perhaps that's a norm for the group, that we make sure we're respectful and not speaking for my buddy over here or for someone else, and that as coaches we allow people to live by those norms and ask permission. So there's that sense of safety and allowing them to be much more vulnerable.
Yeah, thanks, Maribel, for pointing this out. Kacey, you did that beautifully last Friday in your demo, actually. And I can tell you that you absolutely astonished our group, our trainees. And I won't say any more, because if anyone else gets to experience your coaching, I want them to be astonished. So I won't reveal too much.
But such a good group.
Well, thank you. Well, ladies, we're coming to the end of this conversation. I really want to thank you both for being present to it, for giving so many nuggets and incredible tips and tools and techniques that hopefully everyone can learn from and try out, because that's also how you learn, right? You watch and you learn and you practice. I have put in the chat both of your links. So if anyone wants to learn from Kacey and from Lisa, the links are in the chat. I am also adding here that we have applications are opened for the Group Coaching HQ program. We are really, really excited about September. We now are ICF accredited. So by taking our program, you'll actually earn 31 CCEUs, which is very, very exciting. We also have a couple more events. Next week, next Tuesday, it'll be Maribel and I, and it'll be Ask Us Anything. So we have a bunch of questions that have already come our way that we'll answer. But if anyone has any more questions, please bring them to us. And the following week, we have another event with an amazing Group Coaching HQ speaker about marketing your groups. And if you look him up, Jason Van Orden, he's fantastic. So really, really excited about that conversation as well. Lisa, Kacey, Maribel, thank you so much. Maribel, anything you'd like to add before we close?
Thank you for your insights and wonderful, wonderful ideas and tools. Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, ladies, so much. It was a pleasure.
And all of you in the
Thank
chat, all of you watching.
Yes, thanks everyone
for the
who watched.
Yeah, this is great. Have a lovely day.